There are a lot of things we could say about Family Guy's Peter Griffin, and quite frankly, most of them aren't very nice. It's no secret he has his own expansive set of shortcomings that keep us tuning in. Despite having 3 kids, he doesn't seem to be very interested in being a father, and in many ways, is pretty much a child himself. But today we're going to give him credit where credit is due, and talk about some moments where Peter managed to actually be a good father. No, really, it's true. Season 6, Episode 7 starts out with Peter callously endangering the life of his daughter, Meg. Yeah, that sounds about right. But things in the Peter's Daughter episode of Family Guy take a turn when Peter realizes he came precariously close to losing Meg for good after she nearly drowned fetching him a beer and a snack from the rapidly submerging kitchen. Peter does manage to save her just in time, but it's hard to really give him a pat on the back over that, since it was his fault she was in danger in the first place. However, this moment does serve as at least a temporary wake-up call for Peter, who realizes that he hasn't always been the best father to Meg. Okay, maybe that's the understatement of the century, but Peter isn't the most insightful guy around. For a period of time, he genuinely tries to be a better father to Meg and treat her with kindness and compassion. He even feels overprotective when she starts dating a med student named Michael. When Peter thinks Meg is pregnant, he tries to convince Michael to marry her, and since this is Family Guy, we see him take the phrase shotgun wedding a little too seriously. Thankfully, it turns out that Meg isn't pregnant. Michael manages to escape, and Peter apologizes for his part in the whole situation. Although his methods weren't the best, this was a rare case in which Peter was at least trying to help his daughter. When it comes to his son, Chris Griffin, Peter isn't quite as over-the-top cruel as he is to Meg, but that doesn't mean he doesn't owe Chris his fair share of apologies. During the 6th episode of the first season, The Sun Also Draws, Chris struggles with getting his family to understand him. He isn't the biggest fan of being a scout, so he's not heartbroken when he's kicked out of his local chapter. But instead of listening to his son and respecting his interests, Peter decides it's more responsible to storm the scout headquarters in New York and convince them to let Chris rejoin. Of course, the Griffin family road trip doesn't exactly go smoothly, and this time it isn't all Peter's fault. When they stop at a casino, Lois discovers the thrill of gambling and soon loses the family car in the process. In an effort to get the car back, Peter goes on a vision quest, which, strangely enough, helps him bond with his son. He comes to appreciate Chris's artistic talents and actually listens to him when he says he no longer wants to be a scout. Peter was finally able to support his son's passions instead of trying to force him to be someone he's not. It wasn't until the 14th season of Family Guy that we found out the surprising fact that Peter has a sister. Not only does she look shockingly like Peter, but she's also remarkably unpleasant, even by Griffin standards. In the episode Peter's Sister, we're introduced to Karen Griffin, not to be confused with actress and comedian Kathy Griffin. Karen Griffin is a female wrestler, and Lois claims she has been estranged from her brother for quite some time. While the rest of the family is excited to meet her, Peter is less than thrilled due to her harsh treatment of him. Unsurprisingly, being the frequent target of bullies herself means that Meg sees through her Aunt Karen's cruelties and encourages her father to do something about it. What he ends up doing probably isn't what she had in mind, since he dresses up as a female wrestler to duke it out with Karen. Thankfully, Meg saves him from getting his arms broken, which earns her a rare, genuine apology from her father. She's able to examine the effect his sister had on his psyche and how she influenced his poor behavior towards his daughter. In the 3rd episode of the first season, Chitty Chitty Death Bang, Peter proves that there's no task so simple he can't mess it up. Lois managed to get a reservation for Stewie's birthday party at the in-demand children's entertainment place, Cheesy Charlie's. All Peter has to do is drop off a check, but of course, he bungles it and loses the reservation entirely. While Stewie is terrified of what's going to happen on his birthday, Peter scrambles to put together a party that'll delight his son and appease his angry wife. Sure sounds easy, right? Peter does manage to reroute a circus to his yard, which definitely kicks the party up a notch. When Lois laments that Meg isn't there, Peter goes to retrieve her, inadvertently saving her life since she had gotten involved with a cult while he was busy planning Stewie's birthday. He examines the true meaning of children's birthday parties and that they're mostly a celebration for the parents, and gets Meg to come home. He also gives Stewie a great birthday, in which he gets to enjoy his party and take down the terrifying Man in White. Being a teenager is a tough time, especially when your dad is Peter Griffin. In episode 17 of season 2, He's Too Sexy for His Fat involves Chris becoming self-conscious about his weight. It probably doesn't help that a security guard accused him of trying to smuggle out hams under his shirt, and then exclaimed there was nothing to worry about. It's just a fat kid. Ouch. Chris is determined to lose weight by following a diet and exercise plan, but that's easier said than done. In an effort to help out his son, Peter decides to treat him to liposuction. But Chris turns him down, preferring to work hard and do things the right way. Peter, on the other hand, is only too eager to take the easy way out and undergoes extensive cosmetic surgery. While he now looks better, Peter acts uglier, alienating his family and friends with his unpleasant attitude. In addition, it compounds the grief Chris feels about his own appearance. Eventually, things go terribly wrong, as they so often do, and Peter ends up back to his old self. Once he gets a healthy dose of humility, he apologizes to his family, particularly Chris, for being so unkind. Even real-life parents can struggle to find the line between being friends with their children and having to act as an authority figure. So when it comes to a fictional buffoon like Peter Griffin, well, what chance does he really have? But still, when he does give it a sincere try in episode 19 of season 12, Meg Stinks, while on a trip to visit Meg's college of choice for an interview, Peter's shocked to learn he actually enjoys spending time with his daughter. While Peter knows precious little about Meg, the opposite isn't true, and they're able to bond over Peter's interests. Meg ends up skipping her interview in order to spend more time with her dad. Aww. Eventually, Meg realizes she's having trouble balancing her new relationship with her dad and her desire to get ahead in life. While Peter seemingly has nothing better to do than pal around with Meg, she needs to find focus on getting into college. It's a tough lesson, and there are some tears, on Peter's end of course, but he realizes he needs to be her father, not just her friend. We've all had days off at work, but Peter took this to the next level in the very first episode of Family Guy entitled Death Has a Shadow. Well, talk about a throwback. Peter promises his wife that he's not going to drink at a bachelor party, but you can pretty much imagine how well that works out in practice, especially when he gets into a rousing game of drink the beer. The next day he's so hungover he falls asleep on the job and ends up getting fired as a result. While Peter comes clean to his children, he's reluctant to admit how badly he messed up to his wife. And in order to hide his shame, Peter tries to get a new job, but nothing seems to work out. Desperate, he applies for welfare and erroneously receives a check for $150,000. Doubling down on his deception, Peter tells Lois he got a raise and immediately starts spending the money on frivolous things. Oh, except for the moat. That was definitely a smart purchase. When Peter finally has to answer for this crime, he does manage to give a heartwarming speech about how much he cares for his family. He claims his wife and kids deserve to be taken care of despite his personal shortcomings. While the audience may have been moved, the judge wasn't, but thankfully, Stewie's mind control device managed to fix the situation. In the third episode of Season 3, Mr. Griffin Goes to Washington, we once again see Peter in danger of getting fired. Before he can be let go due to skipping work, his company is purchased by the El Dorado Cigarette Company. Soon, Peter is working on toys to promote underage smoking, which Lois has a moral objection to. When she convinces Peter to talk to management about the situation, he ends up getting promoted instead. At first, it's easy for Peter and the rest of the family to get caught up in the benefits of supporting El Dorado. They hire a girl to stand near Meg to make her appear prettier, and even get Martha Stewart to help out around the house. Eventually, Peter's called on before Congress to talk about his company promoting cigarettes to children, but when he hears his infant son Stewie coughing from cigarette smoke, Peter realizes he can't go through with it. Instead, he advises Congress to stop El Dorado, even though he knows it means giving up the luxuries the company provided. This was definitely a moment where Peter stepped up as a father and taught the audience an important lesson about smoking, especially if you're a baby. Gotta cut the habit, Stewie. It seems like more often than not, Peter's schemes go terribly wrong, and this one is no exception. In episode 9 of the second season, If I'm Dying, I'm Lying, Peter's desperate to get his favorite television show, Gumble to Gumble, Beach Justice, back on the air, so he pretends his son Chris has a terrible terminal disease in order to bring the show back. The network agrees as long as they get the film rights to Chris's inevitable demise. When this lie becomes unsustainable, Peter comes clean. Just kidding. He doubles down by pretending to heal Chris of his terrible illness. Amazingly, this kind of works, and people start praising Peter as a mystical healer. This causes people to start worshipping him, which admittedly sounds pretty awesome. At one point, they even make a large golden statue of his image that ends up falling on top of Chris, which is admittedly less awesome. Peter essentially gives up being praised as a god in order to save his son, and we'll let you decide if that was a good deal or not. It's no secret that, in the world of Family Guy, most people find Meg unlikable. But she does manage to get some attention in episode 10 of season 10, Quagmire and Meg. The bad news is that the attention is from her dad's super creepy friend who's way older than her. In the episode, Meg celebrates her 18th birthday, and notorious lech Quagmire swoops in to try and hook up with her. Although Peter usually lets his friends and the general public get away with treating Meg however they want, in this case, he actually stands up for his daughter. In fact, he tries to shut the whole thing down right away, and it's only his wife's protest that get him to stop. Lois fears that forbidding Meg to be near Quagmire will only cause her to rebel against them. But ultimately, this turns out to be one of the rare occasions in which Peter was right. He eventually puts a stop to Quagmire's creepy attempts to get with Meg, something his daughter later thanks him for. When it comes to his kids, Peter often overlooks his youngest son, Stewie. But he did get some attention in episode 16 of season 4, the courtship of Stewie's father. Lois encourages Peter to spend time with Stewie, but soon comes to regret this when she realizes the unique bonding method Peter has chosen. He realizes Stewie loves seeing Lois scared or injured, so Peter starts pulling cruel pranks on his wife. Hey, at least he's trying to bond with the kid, albeit in a really terrible way. Eventually, Lois has had enough, and Peter is forced to back her up when she sends Stewie to his room. In order to smooth things over with his son, Peter decides to take him on a special trip to Disney World. Every child's dream come true turns into a nightmare for Stewie when he's captured and forced to sing "It's a Tiny, Tiny World" over and over again. Thankfully, Peter manages to rescue his son from a fate worse than, well, pretty much anything we can think of. Peter even fights Michael Eisner in order to save Stewie and bring him home safely. Although episode 9 of season 5, Road to Rupert, mostly focuses on Stewie, Brian, and of course a missing Rupert, it does contain a nice father-daughter moment as well. Of course, we're using the word nice here in a relative way. While Brian and Stewie are out having an adventure, Meg is stuck at home, driving her father around. To the surprise of pretty much no one, Peter got his license revoked for driving irresponsibly, and Meg becomes his chauffeur. When Meg finally snaps in a fit of road rage, Peter begins to appreciate her and even admits to enjoying her company. He realizes that he has a wonderful daughter, which was definitely a moment of being a good father. But of course, he manages to immediately make it terrible by vowing to continue to treat her like garbage when other people are around. We're sure Peter secretly assuring Meg she's his best friend is little comfort when her own father is tormenting her. But hey, in Family Guy, the bar for heartwarming moments is set pretty low. Sometimes Peter is just outright horrible to his daughter Meg on purpose, but there are occasions when he manages to create horrific situations for her by trying to be helpful. This was the case in episode 19 of season 2, The Story on Page 1, where Meg joins her high school newspaper in order to have another extracurricular under her belt. She plans to interview Mayor Adam West about his plans to investigate alleged water theft. But Peter doesn't find this interesting enough. Instead, he replaces it with one claiming actor Luke Perry is gay. Not only does this put his family in a precarious legal position, it devastates Meg, who's not just a member of the Luke Perry fan club, but she's the president of the Quahog chapter. Even though Peter did something foolish, he does try to make it up to Meg, albeit in a ridiculous way. He tried to stage a scandalous photo of himself with Luke Perry, but this was much worse plan than simply apologizing. In the end, Meg managed to get an actual interview with her idol, but poor Mayor West never figured out who was stealing his water. Beverly Hills 90210 won't be the same without Luke Perry. He will be missed. Although Meg is the victim of Peter's cruelty, more often than not, he does cause trouble for his other kids as well. In episode 12 of season 3, To Love Die In Dixie, Peter even endangered Chris's very life. His oldest son helped identify a bank robber who he had witnessed rob a convenience store. During the lineup, Peter bumbled into the scene, not only showing the robber a photo of Chris, but one with his fears listed on the back. Naturally, the robber is furious and vows to take revenge on Chris. As a result, the Griffins relocate to the Deep South, and the family does their best to fit in. Peter is appointed sheriff, but he's no match for the robber, who eventually returns after obtaining Chris's new address from the FBI. Still, even though he wasn't able to save the day, what with not having a loaded weapon, Peter still tried his best to save his son. Thankfully, Chris was able to be saved by the father of his new girlfriend, Sam, before the robber could take his revenge. In episode 12 of season 2, Meg tries to get back at her family for constantly embarrassing her. But of course, we all know the Griffins have no shame most of the time. In 15 minutes of shame, Meg gets her family invited on Diane Simmons' talk show, Diane, in order to air her grievances and condemn her family for their poor behavior. Instead of forcing them to reconsider the way they treat her, it just earns them their own reality show called The Real Griffins. After a while, Meg can't take it anymore and quits the show, leaving her family behind. Instead of canceling the show, the network simply replaces Meg with a more appealing teenager, who soon eclipses the rest of the family with her popularity. The family begs the producers to allow Meg to return, but to no avail. So instead, they choose to live in a motel room along with their daughter in order to keep the family together until their contract ends. Even Meg is forced to admit that she's glad her family left the reality show to stick by her, even though they can drive her crazy sometimes. We've just gone over some of the times Peter Griffin wasn't a terrible father, but we're sure there's a couple more examples out there. If you can think of one, share it with us in the comment section, and then click on the subscribe button for more videos from us here at CBR. We'll see you next time.